Claire tightened the knot of her apron as the first drops of cold October rain tapped against the windows of Rosie's diner. It was just past 6 a.m., and the regulars were already filing in blue-collar workers with rough hands and quiet eyes, drawn by the promise of hot coffee and something warm before another long day. Claire moved behind the counter with practiced ease, her smile automatic but sincere. Life hadn't been easy. She worked double shifts to pay for her little brother's medication, often skipping meals herself just to make rent, but she never complained. Kindness, to her, wasn't something you offered when it was convenient, it was who you chose to be, especially when no one noticed. That morning felt like any other until the bell above the door jingled, and a soaking wet older man stepped inside. He was in his 70s maybe, with a long coat that looked more like a blanket and shoes that left muddy imprints on the tile. Claire watched as he hesitated near the register, his hands trembling as he reached into empty pockets. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I just need a place to sit out of the rain." What happened next made the entire diner stop and stare. The young man behind the counter, Tommy, barely looked up. "If you're not buying anything, you can't stay," he muttered, loud enough for the room to hear. A few patrons chuckled under their breath. The old man lowered his head, murmuring, "I'm not asking for food, just warmth for a few minutes." Tommy shrugged, unmoved. "Not how it works, old-timer." The man turned to leave, his shoulders hunched beneath the dripping coat. But before he could reach the door, Claire set her tray down with a quiet firmness that cut through the noise like a blade. "I've got him," she said clearly, already reaching for the register. Tommy rolled his eyes. "Claire, come on, you don't need to." "No," she interrupted, slipping a $5 bill across the counter. "He's a customer now." The diner went quiet. Claire grabbed a mug, filled it with fresh coffee, and carried it to the man, guiding him gently to a booth near the window. "It's not much," she said softly, placing the cup in front of him, "but you're welcome to stay as long as you'd like." The old man looked up, surprised, his eyes wide, misty. "Thank you," he whispered. Claire smiled. "We all need shelter from the storm sometimes." The warmth from the coffee hadn't even settled when the whispers started. From the corner booth near the jukebox, two men in business jackets exchanged glances. "She's got a soft spot for strays," one muttered. The other smirked. "Maybe she thinks he'll tip big after his nap." Claire heard it all, but didn't flinch. She simply wiped down the counter, steady and composed. Still, the tension followed her like a shadow. Later that morning, as the breakfast rush died down, her manager, Linda, called her into the back office. "Close the door," she said, arms folded. Claire stepped inside, wiping her hands on her apron. "Look," Linda began, "this place isn't a charity. You can't just hand out food and expect no one to notice." "I paid for it," Claire replied evenly. "With my own money." Linda sighed. "That's not the point. You embarrassed Tommy, and customers are starting to talk." Claire met her gaze, unwavering. "Tommy embarrassed himself. I helped someone who needed it." Linda's jaw tightened. "This is your warning. Next time, you ask before turning the diner into your personal mission." Claire nodded once, not out of submission, but understanding. She knew the cost of kindness. It didn't always come from her wallet. Sometimes, it came from standing alone. Claire clocked out just past 3 p.m., the rain still falling in steady sheets as she stepped onto the cracked sidewalk outside the diner. Her sneakers soaked instantly, but she didn't seem to notice. Home wasn't far, just a few blocks to the tiny second-floor apartment above Mr. Carlin's hardware store. Inside, the walls were thin, the heater unpredictable, and the kitchen barely wide enough to stretch in, but it was hers. She kicked off her shoes, hung her damp apron, and dropped her keys into the chipped ceramic bowl by the door. The silence inside was familiar, comfortable, even. Claire poured herself a cup of leftover coffee and stood by the window. From there, she could still see the neon sign of the diner flickering faintly through the rain. She thought of the man, the way his hands trembled, the way his eyes met hers without saying a word. He hadn't thanked her. He hadn't needed to. Kindness wasn't a transaction. It was a choice. And hers had come with no receipt. She sighed, not from regret, but from the quiet ache of being human in a world that often forgets how to be. Outside, someone honked. A dog barked. Life carried on. But inside that little apartment, something had shifted just enough to matter. The next morning, Claire arrived at the diner 15 minutes early, like she always did. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still the color of wet cement. She tied on her apron, tucked a pencil behind her ear, and flipped the chairs down from the tables one by one. The place smelled of coffee grounds and yesterday's bacon, grease normal, grounding. But something felt off. It wasn't until she stepped behind the counter that she noticed the envelope. It sat neatly next to the register, no name, no note, just her first name handwritten in blocky letters, Claire. She hesitated for a beat before opening it. Inside was a short letter, typed, formal, cold. It read, "We appreciate your years of service, but effective immediately, your employment at Valley Diner is terminated. Compensation for hours worked this week will be mailed." That was it. No explanation, no warning, no signature. Claire stared at the page, her hands going still. Then she looked up and saw Linda at the back of the kitchen, avoiding eye contact, already busy directing a new waitress. Just like that, she'd been erased. Her breath caught, but she didn't cry. She simply folded the letter in half, laid it gently on the counter, and walked out the front door into the cool morning air lighter, somehow than she'd ever felt before. Claire stepped onto the sidewalk with the letter still folded in her coat pocket. The air was crisp and smelled faintly of rain and asphalt. She had no plan, no job, and no clue what came next, but for the first time in months, she also had no weight on her chest. Just as she reached the corner, a sound caught her earth's unmistakable hum of engines, not just one, but several. 4 large black SUVs rolled slowly down Main Street, coming to a stop right in front of the diner she had just left. Claire turned, puzzled, as uniformed drivers stepped out and opened the passenger doors. From the second vehicle, a tall man in a navy blue suit emerged, someone she didn't recognize at first, but the moment his eyes met hers, she froze. It was the same man from the booth, the man she'd fed 2 mornings in a row without asking questions. But now, clean-shaven and wearing a tailored suit, he looked like someone out of a political campaign poster. He smiled, walked up to her, and said softly, "I was hoping I'd see you before you disappeared." Claire blinked. "You, remember me?" His smile widened. "I remember everything, and I think it's time someone repaid your kindness with interest." Claire didn't know what to say. She just stared at the man standing in front of her, so sharply dressed, so sure of himself, yet still holding that same quiet look he had when he sat soaked and silent in the corner booth. "My name is Marcus Bell," he said, reaching into his coat pocket and handing her a card. "CEO of Bell Foundation. You probably haven't heard of it, but we're one of the largest private funders of youth housing in the country." Claire blinked, her voice catching. "But why are you here?" Marcus smiled. "Because 2 days ago, I walked into a diner feeling invisible, and someone looked at me like I mattered. Someone saw a man instead of a mess." He paused. You didn't know who I was. You didn't need to. And that kind of grace, it changes people. Behind him, the SUV doors opened again, and out stepped his assistant, holding a leather folder. Marcus handed it to Claire. Inside was a letter of employment, a new job offer, Director of Community Outreach, full salary, health benefits, and a note that read, "You were never just a waitress." Claire's breath caught again, but this time, it wasn't from shock. It was from hope. And as the sun broke through the grey clouds overhead, she knew one thing for sure. A simple act of kindness had just rewritten her entire story.